Okay, so when you think of Julius Caesar and Cleopatra in Egypt, what comes to mind? Probably one of the most famous romances in all of history, right? Immortalized by Shakespeare, Hollywood, you name it. But what if I told you the story we all think we know is basically wrong? We're going to dive into the military history laid out by the historian Stephen Dando-Collins, which tells a completely different and way more brutal story. And Dando-Collins is a real pioneer here. He digs into the histories of specific Roman legions, drawing his facts straight from classical sources to figure out what really happened on the ground.
Yeah, the popular version, the one we get from Shakespeare's plays like Antony and Cleopatra, paints this picture of Caesar arriving in Egypt, getting completely swept off his feet by the young queen Cleopatra, and then spending months in this luxurious, romantic dalliance with her, while Rome just waits. It's this epic story of love and power. But here's the thing, according to the actual military records, it's pretty much a myth.
In fact, the author himself just comes right out and says it. That so-called love affair was really a bitter life-or-death struggle for Caesar that dragged on for 7 long months. Caesar wasn't staying in Egypt because he wanted to. He was trapped. Think about that. He wasn't a guest in some fancy palace. He was basically a hostage in a city that wanted him dead. Huge difference.
So let's really set the scene here. We're in Alexandria, between 48 and 47 BC. The Roman Civil War is in full swing. Caesar has just crushed his great rival, Pompey the Great, and he chases him all the way to Egypt, thinking he's going to capture him and finally put an end to the war. Instead, he walks right into a perfectly laid trap. 7 straight months. Just let that number sink in for a second. That's over half a year. So this wasn't some quick romantic getaway where Caesar was just distracted by a beautiful queen. This was a grueling, drawn-out siege where his army was cornered, and every single day was a desperate fight just to stay alive.
I mean, the odds against him were just staggering. First off, he was massively outnumbered by a very capable Egyptian army. On top of that, he was totally cut off from help. No reinforcements could get through. Their food was almost gone. And to make matters worse, his men, these legendary legionaries trained for big open-field battles, were now stuck in the absolute nightmare of close-quarters urban warfare, fighting in streets they didn't even know.
And you can only imagine the psychological toll this took. Morale just hit rock bottom. The historical sources tell us the common soldiers were completely gripped by despair. They honestly thought, that's it, we've been abandoned by Rome. We're going to die here, and no one will even know.
So, okay, that's the big picture, but what was it really like for the guys on the ground, the ordinary soldiers? Let's try to see this whole nightmare from their perspective, specifically from the men of Caesar's famous 6th Legion.
You see, Roman legions had this incredible social structure called the contubernium. Think of it like a 10-man squad that was basically a family, a true buddy system. These guys weren't just soldiers fighting together. They were each other's lifeline. They literally held their buddy's last will and testament, and if the worst happened, they were the ones who had to bury him. In the absolute chaos of Alexandria, that bond was pretty much the only thing they had left to hold on to.
And man, the challenges they faced were just off the charts. Take a look at this. Caesar brought his elite Gallic cavalry with him, some of the best horsemen on the planet. But in the tight, narrow streets of Alexandria, horses were useless. So you've got these elite cavalrymen forced to get off their horses and fight as infantry, a job they were totally unequipped and untrained for, with light leather armor and small shields going up against heavily armed enemies. So over those 7 long months, the situation just kept going from bad to worse. And there were 3 specific crises that pushed Caesar and his men right to the absolute edge of being completely wiped out.
Okay, first up, the water. In a brilliant but deadly move, the Egyptians started pumping seawater into the freshwater channels that supplied the Roman part of the city. Before long, all the Roman wells turned salty and undrinkable. You can imagine the panic that ripped through the ranks. Thirst was about to do what the Egyptian army couldn't. But Caesar, always the problem solver, ordered his men to just start digging, right there, on the spot. They dug all night, and miraculously, they hit fresh water, literally saving everyone from total disaster just in the nick of time. Next, the fire. In a desperate move to destroy the Egyptian fleet in the harbor, Caesar's men set the ships on fire. But the flames just raged out of control and spread to the city itself. And this is just a tragedy for all of human history. The fire spread to the great library of Alexandria, which was the single greatest collection of knowledge in the entire ancient world. An unbelievable number of irreplaceable scrolls, just gone, wiped out forever.
And this fight got so intense that Caesar himself nearly bought it. During a crazy battle in the harbor, his boat was sunk from under him. He had to swim for his life. And get this, the stories say he was holding important documents up with one hand to keep them dry and dragging his bright red general's cloak with his teeth so the enemy couldn't capture it as a trophy. I mean, can you even picture that? It just shows you how personal and desperate the struggle really was.
But somehow Caesar did survive. Reinforcements finally got through, and he won. So you gotta ask, if this whole mess wasn't about a romance with Cleopatra, then what was the real prize? Why was this brutal, unbelievably costly war even worth it? Well, the answer, like it so often is in history, comes down to one thing: money. Let's be really clear here. When all the dust settled, this was a military conquest, plain and simple. Caesar had crushed the Egyptian army and taken control of the country. Sure, he put Cleopatra on the throne, but she wasn't some independent partner. She was what we call a client queen. Basically, she owed her throne to him, and her loyalty was to him and to Rome. And this, right here, is the absolute key to the whole campaign. The real prize wasn't Cleopatra's heart, it was the keys to the entire treasury of Alexandria. Egypt was fabulously wealthy, just unimaginably rich. And by winning this war, Caesar got his hands on all of it. And that single act, well, it changed everything for him.
I mean, that mountain of Egyptian gold literally funded his entire future. He used it to pay for the most over-the-top triumphal parades Rome had ever seen. He handed out huge cash bonuses to his soldiers, making sure they stayed loyal to him. He financed the last bloody campaigns of the Civil War, and ultimately, this is the wealth that allowed him to seize total control and become dictator for life. You can draw a straight line from that bloody siege in Alexandria to Caesar becoming the most powerful man in the world.
So a desperate 7-month war for survival and treasure gets remembered for centuries as a legendary love affair, thanks to brilliant storytellers like Shakespeare. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other huge, messy, world-changing events from our past have been sort of smoothed over and turned into a much simpler, maybe even a more romantic story than what actually happened?